we're going to be looking at this first page where you're going to put your name and the class period. And we're going to look at steps 1 and 2, and we'll work on those together to make sure that we're all on the same page. All right, so step 1.
Right from the very beginning, you can see that he set up his camera in a way that you can see the entire class, which I think is a really good option when you're recording for the edTPA, because you can not only see what he is doing, but you can also see what all of the students are doing for the most part. I would have liked to see some of the students' faces, just to see like how they're reacting to the lesson. But obviously, I understand that's hard when you're also trying to capture what you're doing at the board. But I think right from the start, he has a very good setup. Also, he makes his expectations very clear. He tells them what they're going to be doing and doesn't leave any room to allow students to like disagree or do whatever they want.
Says, explain how you can find the perimeter of any shape. So what is the perimeter of a shape, Destiny?
Add all the sides together.
I really like how he calls the students by name. It makes them feel a lot more important. It makes them feel like their contribution to the question is more valuable, because you can see that the teacher actually recognizes the student. And it just makes the little connection a little bit better as opposed to just pointing.
Add all the sides together. So Destiny answered the question, but everybody has to have it written on their paper. Okay? So to find the perimeter of a shape, you would add all the sides together. Okay, it's important that you get this down because you're going to be working to do these things when you're measuring your shapes, okay?
I like how he right here says that something's going to be important, so students know that they can put a star beside it or put a line so they can come back to it later on in the lesson. It just kind of emphasizes this point and lets the students know how valuable it really is for the rest of the lesson.
So later on when it says to find the perimeter and you're saying, oh, I don't know how to find perimeter, you can go back here and look, oh, I add all the sides together. All right? So we know how to find perimeter, that's pretty easy. Area is a little bit more tricky.
I think right here would be a really good point to check for students' understanding of the concept. Instead, the teacher just says, that's easy, let's go on to something more difficult, but he doesn't actually check to see if all of the students are understanding what he is saying. And especially in the math class, I feel as though it's vital to be checking for understanding often, just because not every student who has questions is going to raise their hand. And so right here, when he's moving on to the next concept, he really should have checked to make sure. And also, I don't think he should necessarily say something is easy just because it could be really difficult for some students, and him saying that it's easy basically dismisses all of their issues and makes it feel as though what they have to say in terms of a question isn't going to be as important because it's supposed to be easy.
What are we measuring, first of all, when we're measuring area? Raquel? We would multiply the length times the width, right? So that would be for number 1, a rectangle. So for number 1, a rectangle, we would multiply the length times the width. Or L times W, if you want to be fancy and short with it. All right? Length times width. What about for a triangle? Does anybody know how you would find the area for a triangle? We have some, so we're going to have to find it. Gabby?
Is it like 10 times?
It's not. That's going to be for something else later on. Donovan?
It's like it's like 2 sides times like a half.
Yeah, you've got the right numbers there. So we have 1/2, like you said, 1/2 times the base. That's just the bottom of the triangle. Okay.
So far, there's not really a lot of student interaction other than them just responding to the question that he's asking. It's just him working off of a worksheet, which can become really monotonous. I feel like if he were to like bring students up to the board and have them fill it in themselves, so other students can copy it down, it could improve the lesson even more to keep people interested in it.
You can like draw an arrow, okay? The height is this, like right down the middle. That's your height. So you'll have to do a different measurement to get your height, because it's not one of your side lines. All right? Now, I'm going to let you go ahead and start measuring.
So going back to the point of the student interaction, I feel like he could definitely use it, a lot more of it, because some of the students appear to not be paying attention to what he is saying up at the board, and they're playing around things on their desk, especially this girl here in the yellow. So he obviously hasn't captured their attention enough, or they don't like care enough to listen to what he is saying, because it's literally just him standing up at the board, which is boring to watch.
You can work by yourself, or you can work with the person sitting next to you. It's up to you how you want to do it. But both of you, but everybody's going to have to turn their own paper in, okay? So you're not turning one paper in for your two people. You're turning two papers in for your two people. Each of you turn in one paper, all right? You guys can work together if you want. What? Yeah, everybody has the same shape still. They'll all be the same length and everything, okay? So let's...
Add the extra box in for the one.
Oh yes, and there are 5 different pieces, different sizes, and I only have 4 boxes for you. So everyone draw here. Well, let me move this so you can see. All right, at the bottom of your page, draw an area here for one more box each. Okay, that's just going to make enough room. There's 5 shapes, so we'll have enough room now to put 5 shapes in your table. Okay, so everyone make sure you draw in these boxes. Okay? Yes. Look up here. See?
Again, so going back to the checking for understanding, students have questions and he just refers them to the board. He tells them to look up at the board where he's done his sheet instead of actually explaining what they did again, which at this age, they seem to be younger. You may have to explain things more than once, just because not every student is going to pick up on it the first time, regardless of whether or not they're paying attention. And so I think it would have been better to just, restate what he had just said as opposed to telling them to look up at the board.
At the bottom there you go. Okay, in your first box, we're going to draw our piece. So I'm going to put a drawing of each piece in so that we know what row. So here's our first one. The first one you're going to do is the square. Okay, so you can draw your square in there right now. Okay, here's the second one. Okay, do you think that's the small, medium, or large triangle? Okay, small one, good. Like the way you guys think. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Our third one, we'll do the medium triangle. Yes, this is on the back, okay, of the first sheet. There you go. Okay, do the square, the little triangle, medium triangle, big triangle, and then this weird.
So he told them to break off into groups and start working on stuff, and then right after he kind of keeps teaching, which for the sake of students paying attention, I don't think it's necessarily the best idea to have them split off and keep teaching, because once they hear that they're going to be grouping up, students begin looking at each other and deciding who's going to be with who, and they kind of lost their focus in the actual lesson that he's giving. And especially now you can see they're kind of starting to get restless a little bit because he's just continuing instruction after kind of distracting them a little bit, which isn't necessarily the best idea because it's going to be harder to bring them back again before they break up again.
Shape. And do not, actually you can draw it if you can, like me if you want, but only if you want to put turf, because that was a horrible drawing. Yep. Alright. Now you're going to know. So now you're going to do for your each one. The second box is the length of your sides. So you're going to have to measure your sides and write them in there. Okay, so you can start filling out this table. You can work, like I said, with the person next to you. So you can have one person measure and one person write it down, or you can work by yourself if you want. It's up to you.
I don't know if I would necessarily give students the option to either work by themselves or in groups, just because it could create a lot of awkwardness within the class for kids who want to work with a partner but don't necessarily have many friends in there. And I think it would be better just to have like one set thing, so either everyone working by themselves or everyone working in partners, just to make it even easier on the teacher. And then also, again, here, it'd be a really great point to check for understanding, which he never does in the lesson. And students probably obviously have questions that they may just be waiting to catch him after class. But I think it would have been a really good point right here just to make sure, any questions, is everyone on the same page before splitting up into their groups.
All right, go ahead and start working.
So overall, his audio is pretty good. You can clearly understand what he is saying, but you can't really see what he's doing on the worksheet, which I think he could have made it a little bit more clear for the camera to see what he's doing. And then also, again, there's obviously problems within the lesson, but the lesson's going to be perfect right off the bat. And I think he did a pretty good job introducing it, even though there were a few issues.